Fearless Anastasia used to work as a simple teacher in a Belarus village, but left everything to conquer, guess what? The city of Florence.
When I arrived, I had no place to stay, so I lived in a church for 2 weeks.
Medici and Dante put her to the test and she passed it.
Salve. Buongiorno.
That's so cool! That's what I call Florentine style. And finally became a part of Florentine high society.
Ciao Vita, ciao, buongiorno.
How a Belarusian can become an Italian?
Never ever ask for a cappuccino at lunchtime.
They say a soul must be born in a specific place, right? It chooses parents, it chooses a place, but I guess not all souls are born where they are supposed to live.
Tell us how you got here and how you realized that this is your place.
It happened in the 90s, when I was a student at the Linguistic University of Minsk. When I saw the cathedral, it felt like my heart missed a beat, and I thought that this is the city where I want to come back to. I was just standing and crying, like just crying. I couldn't believe that there was such a beauty in the world.
Wow, that is something!
I still get goosebumps when I see it. This beauty never gets boring. And even in some weird moments of my life when things don't go the right way, from the street where I live, you can see the dome of this cathedral. I always sit and say to myself, look, if the dome is standing and if someone's built it once, and this is one of the most unique domes...
Just don't be upset.
Yes, don't be upset. It always gives me, it is my...
A symbol of hope.
Support, yes, to rely on.
Until the 14th century, Florence, being an important city by that time, still didn't have a cathedral, but it was very important. Being on an economic rise, they managed to afford something great. So they decided to make a big project, just like typical Florentines, and built the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. Just imagine, they had money for a certain construction, but they went further and enlarged it. Brunelleschi, being inspired by Rome's Pantheon, projected a unique dome, which neither architects nor art historians can fully understand till now, because he didn't leave any documents. It is made entirely of bricks and blocks, and they practically carry themselves. What we see on the outside is like an umbrella, which is supported by a Nina part, and vice versa.
Oh God, take off your glasses!
What's in there?
Oh my, there is a huge bee, a wasp!
Ah, a bee, a wasp. And it's gonna be, you know, I like the way these cuts are made then. The bells. I came back and continued my studies at the Linguistic University of Minsk after graduation. There is a rule that after graduation you have to work in order to thank the country. You had to work for a few years as a teacher and you were sent to some school that could be anywhere.
So you couldn't choose?
Yeah, you couldn't. I had no choice, so I was sent to the village of Chist, Молодечный region. That's about 70 kilometers from Minsk.
It's an interesting place, which was built because there was a brick factory there. It's a village. Apart from the school, getting there was a real adventure. Every morning around 8, I would go there, as my classes didn't start at 8. And there was a very special crowd. Men were going to walk to this brick factory, half of them drunk, and the others were in hangover, and all these people in extremely overcrowded train. Sometimes I just didn't get in and stood at the doors.
And you were going to work?
Yes, very bossy with a briefcase. Miss Anastasia going to see her children.
Welcome to the parallel reality. It could be Anastasia's real life. We are in Chist, the village where she used to work as an English teacher.
I'd been working there for a month, for 2, and for 3 months, when I realized that if I just stayed there, my life would have gone in a very wrong direction. Then I remembered Florence and thought that instead I needed to come up with some new direction in my life.
Well, I didn't want just to come here to stay or to find a job. I wanted to keep on studying.
The village school and the university in Florence, they are so far apart. Did you understand that, and how did you get ready for that?
Yeah, of course, I didn't know any Italian, and it was even more than that. It was a huge step because I applied to the university as if I were a regular Italian student, like a real local. It wasn't some kind of an English-speaking school, so I had to learn Italian, and I just started doing that on my own.
And how long did it take you to learn the language and get ready for the university?
6 months to learn the language.
That's a super fast course.
And then I had the exam, the so-called general exam for Italian language, culture and history. It was nerve-wracking as hell. By the way, the biggest fear I had was not when I started preparing and growing this dream, but when I came here and I was already here. Before the exam I thought, if I don't pass, that's it. My life is just going to be ruined. You know, it was the breaking point. I would even say that I was risking my whole life.
Of course, the dream.
Yes, and it depended on this exam. But I passed.
You were getting ready in such a super short time. It's something almost unreal. How did you do that?
I was just sitting with the books.
Days and days?
Yeah, practically yes. I've chosen the medieval art history course because it was something so new, interesting and mysterious for me. It was at the University of Florence, which has several departments, and I chose practically the philological one, let's call it that way.
In the language you didn't know.
Yeah, dedicating a good share of time to the studies, taking it seriously, I was ahead of many of my Italian group mates. By the way, when I arrived, I had no place to stay, so I lived in a church for 2 weeks. I forgot about it, by the way.
You know, it was like a flight into space, from a teacher in a village to a citizen of Florence. Were you afraid?
Yes, I was. But at the same time, when you have such a drive, you want to change your life dramatically. When people do some jumps like, I don't know, bungee jumping, it was probably like that. You've got this adrenaline rush that drives you, and you don't even realize what you're doing.
What other challenges did you face? You were here in a new place.
Well, the challenges were finding where to live and finding a work. And work, of course, it was a great problem. I went to restaurants looking for a job as a waitress. It was impossible to find one because of my Italian. Even though I knew all the grammar well, I still couldn't speak fluently. But there was some guy I knew, and he got me a work for a week to pick grapes. I went to the vineyards. We got up at 4 a.m. That means my first income here came from picking grapes.
In Tuscany.
In Tuscany, yeah. Eventually, I found a restaurant in the center, in the historic center. I got a job as a waitress. They hired me because of my perfect English. There are a lot of tourists in the center, so I worked there for a year. But it was a very interesting place because they had jazz concerts on weekends, and so my bohemian life started. But it was a very hard to work, really. I mean, I lost about 10-12 pounds. I was almost anorexic. I mean, if there were jazz nights until 2 a.m. and then the next day I had to go to the university, and I kept going to the classes.
What's that building?
This is the baptistry, the place for baptism. It was built, well, finished by the 12th century.
Who were baptized there?
Everybody, every citizen. It was an honorable place to be baptized at. Dante told an interesting story about how he rescued a boy during a baptism who was stuck in a front right before him. And he described the story in the Divine Comedy. Wow, he was very proud of being a Florentine.
I have nothing to add. The picture speaks for itself.
Where are we? where you've taken us to.
This is the Republic Square. We can say it's the center, the heart of the city. This is where the whole history of Florence started. It happened in the 60s BC. We're basically in the starting point because Romans used to take it after the Etruscan system and used to start their cities at the intersection of two main streets. By the way, one of the streets here is Via Roma, which is called that way because it leads to Rome.
They believe that at the crossing of these two streets, a sacred spirit lives. Another interesting fact is that Romans, who were a civilization of warriors, they didn't come to Florence to fight anyone. They just liked the place and they founded a city here.
At the beginning, I told you that the blocks of the city started growing from the crossing, right? This turns out to be one of the very first sectors of this settlement. So this block was a quite prestigious one. Since Dante was a man from not just an ordinary family, a quite wealthy family, his parents had houses here. So he lived in a very prestigious place for those times. They also were neighbors with Beatrice, and the love story, by the way, that's how the famous love began. She was his muse, right? Everyone thinks they had some kind of love story, but in fact, they met when he was 9 and she was 8. Look who is visiting Florence, even Tibetan monks.
So Dante got this bright impression from the girl in a red dress. That's how he described her in the Divine Comedy, and the feeling stayed for life. They never had any story. Dante was married.
There was a memory.
Yes, a memory. He just grew it up into the image of a beautiful lady because in the Middle Ages there was a tradition to praise a lady, and the lady didn't necessarily have to be one's wife. And right next door there is the church that the Portinari family attended because Beatrice's surname was Portinari. And right next door you can see the Portinari palace that we're going into now to look around. It's a very interesting dynasty because later on, in the next generations, members of this family worked for the Medici, for their banks. And now we can look at their house, which later, by strange circumstances as a result of various property transitions, got into the Medici's family hands.
By the way, in Florence there are several plates on the buildings with quotes from the Divine Comedy. The Portinari Palace had this one with a quote from the Divine Comedy where Dante talks about seeing Beatrice appeared before him. And the last words say that her dress was red like flames.
Di fiamma viva, like a vivid flame.
This palace has been renovated and now there is a hotel and a Michelin-starred restaurant. But for me it's interesting because it's a typical example of Renaissance architecture.
So everyone can walk inside just like that.
Yes.
Any person.
Yes.
And feel a little bit, yes.
Salve. Buongiorno.
Oh, that's so cool. That's what I call Florentine style.
Wow! Now Anastasia is an art historian and a unique guide in Florence who speaks 3 languages. But her main achievement is that she has integrated into the Florence community. And it's super difficult to get there since the time of Medici.
Florentines are like a separate race of Italians. They've got their pride. They are a very close community. They are people who live in a kind of their own environment. And it's very hard to get into this environment. So you have to be valuable enough, some kind of a valid person to get into the society. Friendship with the Florentines is almost impossible.
The medieval traditions are still here.
Yes. There is still these families. They become friends from high school years. Then they keep their friendships. It's easier to make friends with foreigners. That's how I call Italians who come from other cities. And many people buy properties here. For example, Stein bought a winery in Tuscany many years ago and still produces wine.
And he's almost your neighbor. What qualities of Florentine people have you acquired?
I don't know. I guess it's more quality of all Italians. Some kind of relaxed lifestyle.
Dolce far niente. Dolce far niente.
Dolce far niente. It means the sweetness of doing nothing. There are masses of it.
You can be a little late, yeah, and never ever ask for a cappuccino at lunchtime.
How does it feel to be surrounded by art 24/7?
It does affect you. You know, people say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but I would add that beauty is the thing which forms your taste, that changes your perception of things, the way you look at this aesthetics. It can't leave you untouched. It's impossible not to absorb it. I'd like to introduce you to a unique person, a chef of a Michelin-starred restaurant here, Vito Mollica. He's been a real star in his field for a long time among the Italian chefs. He used to run a Michelin-starred restaurant at the Four Seasons Hotel in Florence. And when a new restaurant was opened here, he decided to get into this new project and was given a star again.
And he's your friend.
Yes.
Ciao, buongiorno, ciao.
Tutto bene?
Sì, stavamo già per andare
Ciao,
via.
Mira. Piacere.
Piacere mio.
Your impressions about Florence and how to live here, how to be a chief of one of the main restaurants here.
Okay, Florence is the most beautiful city that we have in Italy or in the world because the beauty is everything beautiful here. So we are very lucky, and every day I consider to be one of the most lucky chefs and restaurateurs in the world because I'm part of this incredible project. Before us, there were very famous people who were living here, from Beatrice to Cosimo First. And today we are able to serve clients with the food, with the beverage, with all the hospitality.
So you feel this special vibe here, right?
Absolutely. A special vibe is special beauty. When you are surrounded by the beauty, by the art, by the architectural, you are obliged to do the best.
What is your the most favorite place in Florence?
Apart here,
Is it true that there is a special community here in Florence, like kind of high society? No?
in Florence there is a beautiful community of everyone, from high society to normal people. But everybody are coming here. What we like for the normal people, we try to let them be a star for one day, and to the star, to let them be normal. Grazie
Thank you.
mille, grazie.
Здрасте. А что у вас можно перекусить?
Полпорции осталось, и филе есть такое запеченное.
И салатики, да? А из десертов вон картошка.
And this, by the way, is the famous Florentine food, which is made from a cow's stomachs. It's, how to say, how stomach stewed for a long time and served with this bread buns. And it's one of the nicest shops. They cut it up right here in front of you, taking the trip out.
Well, here in Florence, it's a kind of a place which is small, but it's made on a human scale. That's just the Renaissance idea which was centered on the human being, and that's why you feel comfortable here from the very beginning. An interesting fact, if you look at these holes in the towers here, they were used to insert wooden beams in here so that people could move around. Residents of one tower could go to their neighbors during some fights, and when they cooperated, they could move to each other's place via such temporary balconies. In Italian it sounds like torrazzo. That's how they called this beam. Torrazzo is a very similar to terrace. Well, we've got a torrazzo beam, terrace, so it makes sense.
Chist can be translated as something that is really clean. And as we can see here, it's extremely clean.
As far as the bridges were the place of trade, in the past there were butchers, shops, fishmongers. They sold all kind of food here, and it was not always clean and beautiful. And here Cosimo I established a new order, and for almost 500 years since then, only jewelry has been sold here. People like to buy a pendant or a ring with a Florentine lily on it.
Do you have a Florentine lily?
No, I don't. I still don't. I'm waiting for a Florentine guy who would give it to me.
Non so quanto ce la farò perché coincide sempre il giorno. Finito? Ah, sì.
And this is a famous, no, well, it's just an artist, a friend of mine. We meet there is this kind of a arts fan club. We meet at the Piazza Santo Spirito. We've already been there with you. We usually sit there and paint, sipping a drink. We do it for a couple of hours or so.
You can say there are a lot of girls who have moved abroad. What's special about her? Nothing if you want, but she just did it. Meanwhile, the majority of other girls just kept dreaming. This is the key. And the fact that she's a common girl is just pointing out that a dream is just a common thing as well, and it's next to you. But it needs action. Dreams don't work unless you do.
If there is an idea in your head, it's there for a reason. I think the opportunities and strength to turn it into life will come along the way.
What qualities does one need to do that, to turn their dream true?
I think you don't always have to be very confident. I mean, if I think back to the past, I wasn't so self-confident. I was more sure of what I wanted, however. And you realize that this is yours. It's necessary to decide what you want, because a lot of people don't even know what they really want.
That's a very interesting question, by the way. How do you realize that it's yours?
When you just get goosebumps or so. If someone told you, here, if I give you $1 million, what will you choose? To change your life or to stay where you are, but with this $1 million? The feeling when you're willing to give up the $1 million and go after your dream. I think that's it.
And how does it feel like in the body?
It's a pre-orgasmic feeling. That's how I still feel when I do guided tours, before I go out to meet people. It's like going on a date with the coolest man ever.
A date with the city.
Yes, it's a date with the city. And a date with a dream, isn't it? The facade details repeat harmoniously all the other details of previous ages, but it was completely only in the 19th century. Back in those days, the facade was built using the money of rich Florentine families. And one of the rich families was the Mira family, Russian family from the Urals, who gave some money for this facade. They were very generous patrons of the arts in general, almost like Russian Medici, and they were supporting actively the cultural heritage of Florence.
And it's very honorable that their family coat of arms is on the facade of the main cathedral of Florence.
I should also say a word about curiosity, a very important thing. You have to be curious about what's out there. Living life is like a game, like playing a game. Just don't be afraid to play. There are no losers at the end.
Hello! Well, I want to show you something in the background.
Oh my goodness, oh my!
So, are you feeling nostalgia?
I don't know what to do, to cry or to laugh. Oh, it's impossible. There is a strange feeling in my body.
What it is? What do you feel?
My hands are numb. I can't believe it. Is it with me or someone else? I feel like this whole life was not mine. Like I saw it in a dream.
A movie about Anastasia.
Man, it's unreal.
Come on, I'll show you. A little tour. Here, take a look.
Old, not new. There is the forest where I would go on my breaks. My legs are shaking, literally. It's good that I'm sitting, because if I were standing, I'd have to sit down. I don't know if I could ever pay you for that. Thanks for the teleportation.
Thank you for a wonderful story. I'm so glad we were able to touch you and hopefully to touch everyone watching this as well, and that it was a benefit. Don't be afraid of dreaming. Later we will call you when you are sitting somewhere in Manhattan or on Mars. Anyway, don't be afraid to dream. Here, Anastasia proved it.